November 20th, 2011, I'm running in the Philadelphia Marathon. 4 months earlier, the furthest that I had ran was 3.5 miles. I read the book, The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. Anyone ever read that? The number one principle that stood out to me was keep your commitments. Right away at work, I stopped canceling meetings an hour beforehand. At home, when I said I was going to do the dishes, I did them. And the scariest thing that I could have thought of doing at that time was running a marathon. I remember I was at work and Kyle was sitting next to me, just to give you a sense of what Kyle looks like. He's as bald as Mr. Clean and as passionate as Tony Robbins. So when I looked at him and said, Kyle, do you want to run the Philadelphia Marathon with me? He said, let's go. Before you knew it, we were on our 4-month training program. Now, when you train for the marathon, you feel like a warrior. When it says you run the day it says, regardless if it's day, night, you're tired, or you're hungry. So we ran early in the morning when it was pitch black, and we ran late in the evening when my kids were asleep and I had to sneak home and get in bed. I ran through every single bridge in Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan. I ran through bone-chilling downpours where we're cold to the bone and the hottest of days in the summer. I ran through pain and suffering and injuries that I had to stop for. But I got through it. And that's why on marathon day, when I got to that 14-mile mark, I was not surprised to be feeling great. In fact, I was able to take this photo. I saw the camera guy, and I wanted to let the world know, I got this. I was feeling confident. Now, in the Philadelphia Marathon, the last 12 miles of the race, essentially you go 6 miles there and 6 miles back, and you have a turnaround that's on the river. And so as you're running, you can see mile 15, mile 16, mile 17, and on this other side of the road, you can see coming back, the other side markers, mile 22, mile 23, mile 24. So when I got to mile 17, I could see the mile 22 marker. And I gotta be honest, I started to get just a little bit tired at mile 17. Not exhausted, but tired. And what happened there was the entire course veered left. We went onto a different road where you went down a hill, over the bridge that was on the river, up a hill, and you kept running for a while. And then as you're running, all of a sudden you see a turnabout. So just to visualize it, you start running, and you turn around, and you start running back. And I remember saying to myself, Dave, you got this. Let's go, Dave. We can do this. Come on, Dave. And then I got energy, because what I saw was the road in the distance, and I saw that mile 22 marker and that mile 17 marker. And I realized I was not as tired as I thought. I just ran 5 miles, and it only felt like a mile. So as we're getting to the road, I'm ready to make that right-hand turn to get to mile 22. I'm visualizing the last 4 miles. And as I'm about to turn, the entire course veers left. The entire energy in my body went out like water flushing down a toilet bowl. What I just ran was, I think there's a pointer here, was this tiny little itsy-bitsy part right there, which I was right, was just under a mile. In order to get back to that mile 22 marker, I had to run all the way down here and all the way back, another 4 miles. I was mentally and physically drained. By the time I got to mile 23, it was like I hit the runner's wall. Now, I don't know if you've ran a marathon before, but when you train for a marathon, you only train the first 20 miles. The last 6 miles, you're on your own. And I've heard about it. My dad has run it many times. He said, there's a runner's wall. It happens sometimes between mile 20 and mile 23 or 24. For me, what happened was it felt like I was running on broken glass. My feet were burning with each step. My legs had built up with lactic acid, and I can barely move them. It was like they were screaming, stop running! I was in more pain than I've ever felt in my entire life. At least it felt like it at that moment. I just spent the past 4 months training to keep this commitment, to show myself that I can do something that I couldn't. And all I wanted to do was quit. All I wanted to do was stop the pain. Why do you think it is, as long as you're physically able, that almost anybody can run a marathon? Just shout it out, please. That's you guys. Endurance. Insanity for sure. Training, perseverance. Anything else come to mind? motivation, mindset, challenge. All the right answers, just not the one I'm looking for. No, all the right answers. The number one reason almost anyone can run a marathon is focus. What does a marathon provide for you? What's the vision of a marathon? What? Finish line. How far is a marathon? 26.2. We got some runners in the room. I like it. 26.2. So you have to go 26.2. Anybody can go online and download a 12 to 16-week training program that's time-tested. So if you follow that to the T, at least you'll have enough mileage to get you through the marathon on that day. So when you're running a marathon, you're able to put all of your energy into being fearless, into being mentally tough to deal with the day in and the day out of running, to deal with being hungry and tired and running whenever you need to, and to dealing with being at the wall at mile 23. Now, I mentioned Kyle, who I ran this with. As I was at mile 23, I looked at Kyle. He looked like he hadn't even started yet. In fact, he was running backwards and saying, "Come on, come on." And literally for the last 3.2 miles, he was screaming, "Come on, let's go. You can do this. You're not a failure." And all the way to the finish line, he kept screaming at me. You don't believe me? Just take a look. This is the camera at the finish line. "Let's go. You can do this." And we finished. And when I crossed that finish line, I felt like a champion. Too often in business and life, we're dealing with figuring out the vision, the plan, and being fearless all at the same time. So it's very difficult when we face that wall to get through it. Let me ask you this. What do you think is the number one thing that allowed me to finish that marathon? Goal, adrenaline. What was my goal?
To finish 26 miles.
And where was I?
You were halfway toward the goal when you started looking at goal number 19 or mile 19.
Yep. So I was at Yep. I was at mile 23. Let me ask you this. Do you think if I thought there was 23 miles left to go, regardless of how much Kyle screamed at me, I would have ran through the rest of that race? Does anyone think that? Oh, there's got to be one. Dad, do you think that? Yeah, that's my dad over there. So the answer is, of course not. I trained for a 26-mile race. The fact that so Kyle, by the way, was the number 2 reason I was able to finish that running. If it wasn't for Kyle, I probably would have walked, maybe stopped, but I definitely would have not ran that last 3.2 miles. But the number 1 reason was the fact that I knew that there was 3.2 miles left to go, and I could be fearless to get through that and be mentally tough and push forward. So I mentioned my dad. I was recently sitting on my deck with him. It was a beautiful sunny day, and we were reflecting on this marathon in 2011. And I told him, as I said to you guys, I felt like a champion. And it was a moment of honesty, and I said, to be honest, Dad, I wish I felt like a champion more. In fact, to be honest, it's more of the opposite. I generally feel that I lack confidence. I'm too concerned about what others think of me. I'm indecisive when I need to make a decision. And in general, I fear failure more than I want to, and I get stuck at the walls. And I'm unfocused when I should be. And I shared all this with my dad, but I had a glimmer of hope. And I said, but Dad, I figured it out. What I've done is I've looked over the past 10 years of Lawline, where we started with basically nothing and became the largest provider of online continuing education. And I looked at all the walls we faced and all the drama that we had at a continuing legal education company, and it just felt like a lot of pain and suffering. And I've realized there's no shortcut to experience, right? The same way you can't be a pilot overnight, the same reason you can't be a basketball star overnight, being an entrepreneur takes experience and takes time. And I was saying, Dad, and as I'm looking at you now, I said, look, there's no winning, there's no losing, there's just gaining more experience, Dad. And my dad he was sitting on a seat kind of like this, and I sort of half expected him to get up out of his seat and give me the slow clap. Son, you figured out the secret of life. Congratulations. Well, he didn't do that. But he did say, as he was sitting there, All of that is true. But I'm going to tell you something that I've told you many times before. And I want you to listen. And this is what he told me. He said, you don't know how good you are. And normally my job as a son is when my dad tries to motivate me, as he normally does, is to deflect and not listen and let it go in one ear and out the other. But this time it was different. I remembered a conversation I had with my wife 2 weeks earlier. We were sitting on our bed and she was crying. And it was not about the kids or the family, but she was stressed about speaking in public at her job. And in her new role at the hospital about 2 years ago, every month she had to do a presentation. So I was used to this routine. But this time it was different. This time she was speaking in front of the board of advisors at her hospital because of something they did well. And I knew her problem wasn't focus because she had it memorized, she had all the slides done. So I looked at her and I said, Kel, what are you concerned about? And she said to me, she goes, I'm afraid if I go up there, I'm going to sound inarticulate. And if I sound inarticulate, they're going to know I'm a fraud. And that I've been a fraud for the past 14 years. I got chills when my wife said it to me. I even got chills right now saying it. And just so you get a sense, my wife has been at this hospital for 14 years, has had numerous promotions, won Social Worker of the Year. She was handpicked for this new position. She gets accolades from everybody she knows. She's the smartest person that I know. And I looked at her and I said, Kel, you don't know how good you are. And so as I'm sitting there with my dad on the deck and we're having the conversation, I'm thinking back to that, I realize it's not just Kelly. It's not just me. You don't know how good you are. See, I've spent the past 25 years of my life trying to decode success. In high school, I was reading Entrepreneur magazine, and I was taking the articles and I was putting in a binder to try to figure out what was working and not. In college, I started reading entrepreneur books and doing the same thing with that. In law school, I started my own TV show, interviewing entrepreneurs. I put it on public access and put it online to find out their secrets. When I started my own business, I hired coaches to work with me to better myself and my business. One of the first coaches that I hired was Kim Addis from Frame of Mind Coaching. And she had a really unique system that you would actually, has a software where you journal online, and then she reads your journals, responds to them, then you have regular conversations. From 2012 to 2015, I journaled with her. I took over 600 pages of journals and I read through them all. And I looked to see where all the walls that I hit throughout that time. And I wanted to see if I can find any themes that happened, and I did. And the major two themes that I found was lack of confidence and lack of focus that prevented me from breaking through those walls. I recently saw Craig Valentine. Does anyone know Craig Valentine? Okay, I knew you would, Mitch. So Craig Valentine is a public speaking guru. In 1999, he won the Toastmasters competition, 30,000 other competitors, and he won it for public speaking. But before he did that, he was a 9-to-5er just like you and me. And he went up to his manager and he let him know that he was going to resign to pursue his dream in public speaking. And his manager looked at him and 3 times in a row gave him a raise. Said, we really need you here. That's uncertain. This is certain. The first 2 times he said, no, thank you. No, thank you. The third time, it was so much money, he hesitated. So he went home that night, spoke to his wife, and he came in the next day, and he resigned. And what he realized was he was almost too good to be great. He was almost too comfortable in his good life to achieve his greatness. Now, how does that happen? How do we get too comfortable in our good life in order to achieve greatness? Well, what happens is, over the years, all these walls that come in front of us that we don't break through eventually form a box around us, right? And then the greatness seems all the way over there, and we get really comfortable in the king or queen of our kingdom with the box safely protecting us. And so as I'm sitting with my dad on the deck, I continue to be honest and complain. And I said, Dad, I just turned 40, and the 20-year-old David would have definitely been proud of what the 40-year-old David has achieved. But I got to tell you, at this stage in my life, I thought I would have had a bigger business. I thought I would have had more of an impact on the community. And my dad, in his wisdom, looks at me again and says, Dave, do you know how many people would switch places with you and be in your spot to what you've achieved at this moment? And as I thought about that, it hit me. My issue was not that I wanted more money or more notoriety, which I won't complain about if that happens. But my issue was that I felt too comfortable in my good life, to achieve my greatness, right? And I realized that moment, as we're talking, what my mission was. And my mission was to help all of us break through our walls, right? And how do we break through our walls? And looking back to all the conversations that we had and the experience and the two themes that I saw, the two ways to break through our walls are to look within ourselves and to look at ourselves and to be, the first F of the fast forward mindset is to be fearless. And the second F is to be focused. You got to push yourself to be focused when you don't want to be and fearless when it's hard. Now, this image here, can you share with me, or anybody just scream it out again if you want, what are the two things that you see in this image? I think I heard them both. So mountains and lions is the two things. This is actually a vision I've had since I was 10 years old. To me, a lion has always represented strength, confidence, fearlessness. A mountain climber, climbing a mountain range, always represented to me the ultimate challenge, the ultimate focus, not only to prepare for it, to get yourself through it. So whether you're a visual learner or you learn by reading, you need to think about either being fearless and focused or being the lion inside of you and the mountain climber inside of you. In 2008, I was lucky enough to travel with my wife to South Africa and see lions up front in their natural habitat. I took this photo. It was at the nighttime we were driving by, and the lion was right in front of us on the road. Right after this photo, the lion in the back gets up. He walks over towards, we're in an open Jeep, right? There's 8 of us in the Jeep. He walks towards us and goes, "Argh!" Much more loud than that. And he did it again. And I realized at that moment, I've never heard a lion roar in person. And it doesn't come from their mouth. It came from his belly. And I've never heard anything like that. And at that moment, I realized what fearlessness was when he's literally 10 feet away from us and we're in an open Jeep and he's walking towards us and roaring. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. But then a few seconds later, he walked back, the lioness got up, they went to the side, and they started mating. So I realized he was telling us to get out of there, but we stayed. As a side note, I videotaped it, and it's on YouTube. It's one of my most viral videos, and I'm happy to share it. So that was my side note there, but it was really unbelievable. And what a lion does is they nip fear in the bud. And what we're talking about now is what NIP stands for, okay? By show of hands, raise your hand if you're fearless 100% of the time. Phew. I was afraid there'd be that one person who raised their hand. Now raise your hands if you have moments of lack of confidence, fear of failure, concern about what others think of you, indecision. Now raise your hand and raise it high if you have moments of that. Thank you keep it up, I'm sorry, keep it up. Now, look around. What? What do you see when you look around?
We're not alone.
Did we do this together? You're not alone. Too often we feel like that boy in the corner. I feel that way all the time, where you're so alone and afraid, and you feel like you're the only person at the wall, and you just want to go away, and you want to put your head down. You're not alone when you're at mile 17 and you're turning around and you think that you're about to hit mile 22. In fact, I learned in 2016, has anyone raise your hand if you've run the Philadelphia Marathon. Okay, one, okay. In 2016, they changed the course and they removed that little part. And what I realized was there's probably dozens, if not hundreds of other people who made the same mistake I did and thought, that was going to be mile 22. You're not alone when you're mile 23 of the marathon and you hit your wall and you got to see yourself through it. You're not alone when you're afraid to speak in public because you're concerned of what others are going to think about you. You're not alone when you're trying to resign and you get a promotion. It's a good thing, but you're not alone. You're not alone when you prepare for a case and put everything down, you focus, you have the plan, and you lose. You're not alone when you lose a big client for no fault of your own, but they went out of business. You're not alone when a top employee leaves and leaves a big gap for you to fill. You're not alone when your revenue's down when you want it to be. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You're really in a crowd, right? You're in a crowd of other successful entrepreneurs. Everybody here made a choice to come here. Everybody here is in this crowd right now who's faced that wall and is not alone trying to better themselves. Every successful person has to face the walls on a regular basis and break through them. That's how you get to your greatness. So in fact, instead of feeling alone, you should feel excited when you get to the next wall. You should feel energized when you get to the next wall. And the reason you should is the I. And the I is, I will get through it. How do I know you're going to get through it? Confidence. I know you're going to get through it. Trust. Trust in yourself. Faith. Preparation. I heard one. Experience. So all these are exactly right. You're going to get through it. I know you're going to get through it because you've done it hundreds of times before, if not thousands of times before. In fact, you sitting here right now is evidence that you'll get through it. So when you come up to a wall, I want you to visualize yourself with this sledgehammer. And I want you to go, and maybe you'll have a little break in the wall. Maybe you have a little hole in the wall. Maybe you'll turn around. Maybe you'll come back a couple years later. Maybe you'll come back a couple weeks later. Maybe a couple hours later. But you'll keep pushing. And I can tell you, regardless if you get through the wall at that moment, you will get through the feeling of this boy in the corner when you feel so alone and afraid. You will get through that. And you will break through that wall. So as you're working to get through it, I want you to keep hitting, and then eventually you break through the wall and you get through it. And the last thing you know, so the N is you're not alone. I will get through it. And the P is you need to play the part. You need to play the part of somebody who's not concerned about what others in the audience are thinking of them. I'm going to share a story of how I realized this. In 2012, Lawline just surpassed $5 million in revenue. We had our millionth course completed. And I was feeling on top of the world. I decided that was my time to pursue my dream in educating entrepreneurs. So I called Kyle on a Thursday, and I said, Kyle, remember Kyle, bald as Mr. Clean, as passionate as Tony Robbins. And I said, Kyle, I want to start this business educating entrepreneurs. Will you do it? And he said, let's go. That Monday, we were in a co-working space trying to figure out new ideas. By that Friday, we had a logo, we had a website, a basic website, we had some speakers lined up, and we had a tagline. Learning is easy, change is hard. I'll just do it again. Learning is easy, change is hard. With that tagline, that's all I needed. We ran back to our office. I gathered everyone together and said, ladies and gentlemen, we have an announcement to make. Kyle and I are starting a new company. And I sort of half expected everyone to do that slow clap that I wanted my dad to get up and go. And everyone was just sort of like, okay. It was only a week. By the middle of the next week, we were sort of hustling and bustling, trying to do stuff. And my dad came back from a trip. He was gone for, I think, about 3 weeks. He was in Nepal. And my dad walks in, and I guess I was not in my normal office. He saw I was in this corner office, and he sees me and Kyle in this office. He sees this new logo, this new idea, this new business, and he walks in like this. And I walked to him. I said, hey, Dad, how you doing? And he looks at me like this. And through the expression on his face and the reflection of his eyes, I saw somebody who was manic. And he just said to me, he didn't even know what I was doing. He just said, because he knew that wasn't my office, I kicked somebody out of there, don't you think you're moving a little too fast? No, Dad, this is what we're doing. We got great ideas. Anyways, a couple hours later, I remember asking Kyle a question. I said, Kyle, do you think we should do X, Y, or Z? And Kyle said, I don't know. I'm not sure. What do you think? That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for the guy who got me through the last 3 miles of the marathon that said, let's go, we can do this, let's go. And he was scared and sheepish. I felt manic because my dad looked at me like I was manic. I felt scared because Kyle looked at me as scared. I wasn't running on a plan. I was running on passion. And my passion was, learning is easy, change is hard. Now, as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure we're all, maybe many of us can relate to that, I do that many times, where I have passion and I don't have that focus that I want, and I just kind of go off and do it. But this time it was different. This time, I took Kyle along for the ride. And what I didn't tell you was the week before, when we were at the co-working space, it was on that Wednesday, Kyle comes up to me and says, Dave, regardless of what happens here, I've realized entrepreneurship is for me. I can never go back to that 9-to-5 role I had. Thank you so much for opening up the light for me. I said, absolutely. And between what he said and my confidence in that tagline, when my COO called me the next day and said, Dave, we got to replace Kyle because he was the head of this department and now things are falling through the cracks. Can I do that? I said, sure. That was at the peak. Now, less than a week later, there's a wall in front of me. And the wall is, people don't believe in me. People are scared. And I have no way to get through that. I called up my coach, Kim. By the way, and I said, Kim, I don't know what to do here. I'm really in a bind. Kyle got me through the hardest 3 miles of my life. I can't get him through week 2 of a new business idea. I'm feeling disloyal. I'm feeling like a failure. I don't know where to go. And she said to me, Dave, let me ask you a question. If everybody thought you were a moron, what would you do? Well, I said, that's easy. If everybody thought I was a moron, it wouldn't bother me because I know I'm not. She said, good. Then she said, if everybody thought you were a genius, what would you do? Well, I said, well, if everyone thought I was a genius, I would play the part because I'd want to rise to their expectations. And then she said to me, well, why can't you just play the part all the time? And as she said that, I realized my issue was not what my dad thought of me or what Kyle thought of me. My issue was what I thought of myself. And I said, Kim, but I don't know. How do I do it at this time? What do I do? How do I fix this? She said, here's what I want you to do. Go back tomorrow, go into your office, leave the room with Kyle and go into your own space and close the door. And I want you to sit down, and I want you to think about, what do you want? Not what does your dad want, not what does Kyle want, what do you want and what do you believe should be done? And as I sat down there and I focused, I realized the mistake that we had made. And I realized what I should have done was take a week to brainstorm and 4 months to plan. So I put Kyle in a more entrepreneurial position in the company. And I stopped what we were doing, and I went back to the mix. I played the part as a fearless leader who believed in myself and my decisions. Even though I didn't have the focus, I made the decision to go back because I knew it was the right thing to do. We're going to do a quick recap. This is my motivational speaker in me. Now, if everyone can just get some energy in the room. What does N stand for?
Not alone.
Thank you. What does I stand for?
I will get through it.
And what does P stand for?
Play your part.
And that's how you nip fear in the bud. But I can tell you, being fearless is important, but if you're not focused, if you don't have the focus, how are you going to get through mile 23 when you hit the wall if you think there's 23 miles left to go? You need to know where you're going. If not, it's very hard. How are you going to get through when your dad looks at you and Kyle has no idea where to go and you have no plan where to take the idea? How are you going to get through that moment if you don't have focus? So I want to share with you, this is a line that I've been using that makes it really simple. When you're at that moment, because for me, I've always wanted to simplify things, so when you're at the moment, you can use it, because if you can't simplify it, you can't use it. So it's, I'm not alone in being afraid to speak in front of others. I will get through it by playing the part as a fearless public speaker. I'm not alone in starting a business idea with no focus. I will get through it by playing the part of a fearless leader. Whatever you want to fill in, but you just got to recognize that you're not alone and you'll get through it. I was lucky enough to travel to Patagonia with my dad earlier this year. That's actually me in the photo walking down. That was on our first day of our hike. It was a 90 miles of hiking through Patagonia. And I could tell you, when you're traveling through Patagonia, when you're training for it, you gotta wake up early and you gotta focus. And that's the mountain climber in all of us. So wake is what we're talking about now. How do you focus? All you need to do is think about the marathon story and ask yourself, what is your 26.2? Not what's your 30, what's not your 22, what's your 26.2. The more specific, the better. And I'm gonna give you a real easy way for you right now to figure out what the foundational 26.2 are that will help move you forward. Think about the top 3 things you wish you were more fearless about. We all know those. You at least know the top one. And think about the top 3 things you wish you were more focused about. Start with that, right? Start with those. And that's where you can start. Now, you know you have the right 26.2 if A, you can agree to a training plan. Now let's talk about what a training plan is. This is the training plan that I use when I train for the marathon. What stands out to you here? So there's a half marathon, yep. Very specific. Climbing, yep. There's rest, yep. So at the end of the day, a plan is not a plan unless you can have KPIs that you know that we're successful. So when I actually train for the marathon, it might be hard to see, but I actually put the dates each week, and at the end of the week, I was able to write what I accomplished, so I knew if I did the 5 miles or if I didn't, and at the end, I put my totals. And so if you don't have a plan that has dates and clear KPIs, you're running on passion. By the way, this is the hardest part for me, at least, and for many of us, is we got to roll up our sleeves and we got to figure this out. Let me translate what this looks like in business. So in Lawline, we have something called a quarterly priority tool. So the first thing we put on there is, why is it important? Why are we doing it? And then we put the 3 months that we're doing it. What are our outcomes that we want for each month? And then at the bottom, we put, what's our clear measure of success? And then we put, what does wow look like? So if you want to do anything that's above an idea, if I had done this with the entrepreneur education platform, I would have got a lot much further than a tagline. So this is a requirement for anyone in our business if you want to turn an idea into reality. Got it? Good? Cool. And so the final part is the most important part. And it goes back to what I said early on, the first thing I said with the book, Success Principles, is keep your commitment. If you want to be successful, if you want to break through your walls, the best thing you can do is be up against the wall and know that you're committed to finishing that race, to know that you're committed to seeing things through. The easiest way to get stuck in your wall is to break your commitments that you stuck with. So you got to know that you're going to do that. You also have to know that nothing is as clear as a marathon. Marathon's very specific. You know the mileage, you know the time-tested plan, and you can be fearless. Everything takes more energy than a marathon, but if you keep your commitments to see each part through, you'll be able to break through your walls much more and much faster. So let's do a quick recap. I won't make you scream this out, but so wake up and focus is, what is your 26.2? Agree to a training plan and keep your commitment. So I'm going to give you a hint. I'm going to ask everybody, I'll ask everybody now, if you could open up your phones if you want, and there's something in it for you, but if you can compose an email to me, and my email is david@lawline.com. It's a known fact that if you write something down within 2 hours of learning it, you're 70% more likely to remember it within 30 days. And when I get this email from you, I will respond with an article that I wrote called The 5 Themes of Success. It was what I got from those interviews that I did with those entrepreneurs, and those 5 themes are what I use to grow Lawline from nothing to where we are today, and they're really simple and straightforward, but really helpful. So what I want you to answer is what does NIP stand for, and nip fear in the bud? And does WAKE stand for, and wake up and focused? Just give 30 seconds, and then I'll ask it out loud. So if you want to cheat, you can also cheat. Cool? Okay. What does NIP stand for nip fear in the bud? Not alone. I will get through it. Play the part, right? Thank you. And what does WAKE stand for wake up and focus? What is your 26.2? A is a tough one. Agree to a training plan. And keep your commitments. So send that to me. I will respond with this article. Now, the next thing I'm going to ask you to do can be one of the more important things you do from this conference. It's a big thing to say, but early on in working with Kim, she had me email 2 to 3 people in my network who I've known for 20 plus years, 2 to 3 people who I'm family members with, and 2 to 3 people I work with. And she had me ask them the question, what is unique about me? And she had me ask, what do you see as my unique ability? How do I produce positive results? What am I good at and passionate about? And what can you count on me for? I gotta tell you, when you wanna know how good you are, you wanna get that sense, everybody around you already knows. And you're gonna be so taken aback by all the great things that you hear. And so when you send this email, what you're gonna do is, you're gonna say, you're working with a coach. I will be your coach for this. And you're gonna ask them, my coach has asked me for this, and I need to have it, can you get back to me within 24 hours? Because this way you're committed to somebody else so that they will get back to you. It's amazing. When you get all these emails back, what I want you to do is take them and combine them into some sort of paragraph, because there'll be some repeat there. And that paragraph, if you want, first of all, you should put it up in front of you, and you should share it. But I'll email it to me. I'll be your accountability buddy on that. And when I get this email from you, I will send you a book or email you a Kindle version of the book that I read. It's a top-selling book that after I finished it overnight, it reduced 50% of my worries. And that's my gift for those who take the action step to do that. So it's 2 to 3 people. So it's up to you. I sent it to, I think, 3, and 3, but you can do 2, 2, and 2, 1, whatever feels comfortable to you. I wanted to get as much information and data as possible. So, good? Any questions? Yes? Yeah, so, thank you. So, one, you could take a picture of this, or you can, I can actually email you, if you email me, the David at Lawline, which again is right here, I will send you the template that I sent out. It's only 2 paragraphs, but essentially you're asking those that you know for a long time, what is unique about you? And you're gonna hear such amazing things. What makes you different? What's special about you? What do they love about you? What do you do that's great? And you're gonna get this back. And then you're gonna take all that in 8 different emails and you're gonna put it into a paragraph that sort of sums up what everybody said. And then do whatever you want with it, but email it to me so I'll be your accountability buddy. And so my incentive for you is to mail you a copy of a book that I read. I'm not gonna tell you the name because you gotta mail it to me, but it reduced my worries by 50% overnight, and it's really an amazing book. It's not my book. Okay, so 2 years after I finished the Philadelphia Marathon, I was running in the New York City Marathon. And this time, I was ready. As I was getting to mile 23, I knew the wall was coming, so I was ready for it. And in the New York City Marathon, as you're around mile 23, you go into Central Park, and it's more hilly than you want. So I'm running, and I'm saying, Dave, you got this, we can do this. And I'm running through, and I'm 23, 24, 25, 26. Okay, Dave, we got it. And I finished. I was in pain, I was tired, I was suffering, but I never hit the wall. What I didn't tell you was the year before, I actually trained 350 miles plus for the New York City Marathon. The week before the marathon, Hurricane Sandy happened, and the marathon was canceled. So I ended up just running my own marathon that year with Kyle, because we trained together, and I did that. And then I ran another 350 miles this year. So 700 miles later, that's what I looked like when I finished the New York City Marathon. And I looked up what the definition of experience was. And it says, and the per part comes from the late 15th century roots, and it's the state having done something and gotten handy at it. It took me 700 miles to go from looking like that at the finish line to looking like that. My wife, Kelly, who I mentioned earlier, it took her 3 days. So what we did actually after that conversation, we called up Kim. And I said, Kim, we need your help. So she did, it was 3 days away. She did 2 days of journaling with Kelly and 2 phone calls with her. And the purpose was to figure out, to help Kelly how to play her part. And I can tell you, Kelly walked into that morning she woke up, she felt calm, she felt collected, and she was confident. She's never in her life walked into a public speaking situation like that. So it took her 3 days. Kyle went back to our company for the next year and a half. He was doing stuff, but he was never really happy again. You remember, he figured out he wanted to do entrepreneurship. He ended up leaving, going back to Ohio. Within a year, he started his own company. As a side note, you remember the guy who was not even sweating at mile 23? He became an ultra marathon runner, and he runs 50-mile marathons plus. And I take full credit for it because I told him to run with me. It took Kyle almost 2 to 3 years to get through his wall. It took Kelly 3 days to get through her wall. It took me 3 years and 700 miles. The fast-forward mindset is not an overnight success. It's not like you just do it. It's a mindset shift that we need to make to break through our walls for the rest of our life. And you always need to think about, because if you can walk away from one thing, because you're getting a lot of information here, I want you to walk away with that image. And I want you to remember of the lion or the lioness that's always inside you, inside all of us, and the mountain climber that's inside all of us. And when we hit that moment where we feel there's a wall in front of us, just think about that, and that will get you through where you need to go, and you'll end up going from your boxed-in walls to your greatness. Thank you very much.